Good evening. Welcome to the Town of North Andover Finance Committee meeting on Tuesday, April 27th, 2021. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Law, Chapter 38, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15th, 2020 order imposing strict limitation on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the North Andover Finance Committee will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and or parties with a right and or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the town's website at northandoverma.gov. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch the meeting may do so on their televisions by tuning to Comcast Channel 99 or Verizon Channel 28 or online at northandovercam.org. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so, despite best efforts, we will post on the Town of North Andover website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. It is now 7:04 and I call this meeting to order. I am going to do a roll call attendance. Thomas Ringler.
Here.
Christine Allen.
She raised her hand.
She raised her hand. She's here. For all those who are not viewing this on screen, she is here. Dustin Silk. And Dustin is here if you could not hear that. Kevin Foley.
Here.
Ed McMillan.
Here.
Donovan O'Connell.
Here.
Jen Lund.
Here.
Regina Keene.
Here.
And I am Sasha Weinrich. It is now 7:05. I'd like us to please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. So I will take public comments. I'm going to just double check to see if we have any additional public comments. We do not. No public comment this week. So we can move on. The next item, there's a little bit of feedback if folks don't mind muting themselves. Great. The next item on our agenda after public comment is a discussion regarding potential sources of additional funds from the federal government or other sources. So we actually had Melissa Rodriguez, the town manager, and Lynn Savage, the finance director, here last meeting, and they gave us some really great information about that. I checked in with them. I have to obviously produce this agenda in advance, and I checked in with them, and there's no update to that information. So it wasn't necessary for them to come and speak to us again. As soon as we get additional information, we will have them in, and I can also have additional memos created and forwarded to us as needed as soon as they get that information. So they are not in attendance tonight. Does anyone have any questions about that?
I just a comment and I guess a clarification. It didn't seem to me that really would change how they plan though, because they have to plan and allocate the money, and if that comes in, they can get reimbursed after the fact. It's almost like having a big Visa bill and somebody gives you a Macy's debit card. I mean, it's great. You really can't apply it what you want to apply it to. It seemed to me that it's great. It could help us out, but it doesn't really help in the planning. Did I capture that correctly?
Maybe. So I think the important piece here is the ability to use it to cover lost revenue, right? And so that would be a big piece that we have to understand how that's applicable. If that's applicable, for example, to enterprise funds, or how that really works. I don't have the answers to that, and so I think they're waiting to get more guidance. and then we can kind of figure that out. Ultimately, I don't think it changes this committee's recommendations. I don't think it changes how we proceed, because we have to proceed as if those funds aren't available, or that they are, but we don't know how we can use them or earmark them just yet. Can everyone mute for me, please? Thank you. So I that would be my understanding. Does anyone have additional comments about that? I mean, I just don't know enough. Okay. And so as soon as we know more and get more information, we will certainly have them come in and speak to us. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is discuss and revise our warrant letter. So I apologize for sending it out a bit later than I normally would have liked for everyone. So I understand if you didn't have opportunity to review in detail. What happened was we put it all together. There's still some pieces missing. We got those. We put those together. I think it's a really strong, like a really solid draft. I know that I still, or if anyone else wants to volunteer, I'm happy to take volunteers as well, to go through and make some grammatical kind of tweaks and to make sure it sounds like one voice and to change the numbers so they all are represented in the same fashion, that kind of stuff. That's typically what we have to do every year. And then I think what's important for right now in this meeting is I can pull it up on the screen and we can just go section by section. And I think whoever kind of wrote the section can give the big highlights. We all can agree on the intent of the message. And then if anyone has questions, they can ask them. But for me, I think what's important tonight is not necessarily, we're not going to wordsmith this virtually during our meeting. That to me is not a productive use of time, but just to make sure that we're all on the same page on what we're saying and the intent of the language, so that everyone who's, that's their section, or whoever is editing this over the next week, we have the committee's consensus on each section. Does that sound right to everyone? For those of you in the public, everyone's shaking their head, but we are on mute. So, all right, so I'm going to pull this up. Okay. You see my screen now. I can't see you guys anymore, so you have to unmute. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So,
Can you make it bigger?
because I can, but please note that I can't see you guys anymore because I'm sharing my screen. So there's probably a way to see both, but I can't. So if you want to chime in, you have to unmute and speak. I can't see your faces. So essentially, I'll start with the executive summary. This is a section that I will finalize. I just included here what we wrote last year. My recommendation is to come back to this at the end, because this is just going to be a summary of everything we talk about throughout the body of the report. So we can start with municipal and shared expense budgets. Dustin, is there anything in particular you want to talk about? I mean, I think the big thing is that it is a reduced services budget. Is there anything else anyone wants to discuss or highlight? I will take that as a no. So the next section is the school department. Regina, do you want to kind of, or Chris, do you want to talk about this?
One thing for clarification.
Yes, please.
So this talks about the complete budget, so the 112 million, right? that's not just, so when I read municipal and shared expenses budgets, I would assume that's just the admin side of the town plus shared services. But here we're talking about 112 million general fund spending. Confuses me a little. So I would have expected maybe like a 20 million number, if at all, maybe even less, as the sum of spending. So I don't know why we switch between the total budget and just a subset of budget.
Okay, good. That's okay.
I'm sorry. Can you make the comment again? I was looking at something in the school section. I apologize, and I didn't.
So I think what Thomas is saying is that the general fund spending is a total, so it's inclusive of the schools, and we're really just talking about. Is that what you're saying, Thomas?
Yes. So
General fund spending.
yeah, I would
okay.
have expected a low. We talk about a smaller number in that section, just the admin and the shared expenses budget, which I don't think is more than $20 million.
So we'll go back and we'll just clarify
Yes,
that
I
number.
agree.
Yeah, I do too. So we'll go back and we'll clarify that. And then I think that's a really good point. We'll fix that. Down here, how does this sound? This is kind of addressing that appropriation of 2.7 million, which partially goes to the health department and the rest goes to the schools. Do we want?
I was questioning why we would put that there, because I talk about the 2.7 million in the schools section. But well, yeah, I mean, I personally don't think it's necessary if we change the numbers in the first sentence to talk about just the municipal and shared.
Okay, so let me track.
I mean, that's just my.
No, I think that. What does everyone else think? Dustin, is that okay with you? Does that make sense? Or
I debated the same thing. Can you hear me? Or
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. I agree
why
that
don't we,
it's redundant. Yeah.
All right. So, well, and you also didn't have the school section to look at, right, when you wrote this. So it's not. So this is kind of part of what we're doing, right? So So maybe we take that piece out, and then clarify this to show.
Shared services budget.
To share, yep, and then kind of move this around. How's that?
Looking from a high level, I like the first two paragraphs. That's basically tells you, what's included. And the message is really, there was not much of an increase, and driven by the pandemic. The last two articles are really going into details and, confuses me more than, it takes away from the message we send in the second paragraph.
Yeah.
That, we're really very conservative with that side of our business, which is a good message, from a finance perspective.
Okay. So I think maybe it would make sense to put some of this here, up here, and then end it with given this be kind of the last sentence.
Yeah, I think it's important to talk about the community support coordinator being moved from the shared services budget to the police budget.
Yeah.
I agree, because then it looks like we are, we're decreasing shared services by more than we really are in practicality, right? It's just being reallocated.
Yeah, I think if you take the final paragraph and merge it into the second paragraph, with given the minimal increases as the last sentence of that merged paragraph, you have it perfect.
Got it. All right,
Agreed.
I'll make these notes and then we'll move on.
Okay, so in the schools section, I just give a high level explanation of there was the 2021, the FY21 budget of 53 million plus cost of level services of 1.3, giving us the recommended operating budget of 54.3 plus anticipated one-time COVID expenses. I have 2.6 there, and I saw above it said 2.7. So maybe I did a typo. I don't know which one is correct.
No, it's right. It's go ahead.
You couldn't hear me. And that was the one thing I was saying, even though it's getting deleted in that upper section, I thought it was the 2.6, not the 2.7. So
okay. I was like, oh, I don't know which one's right.
No, it is. No, it's 2.7. So it's 2.7 total with 2 points, whatever, to almost 2.6 being going to the schools, and then 110 going to the health department.
Health. Okay. So they're both right.
Yeah, they were. So if you go to this transfer, so I'll go to the articles. We're going to vote on the articles next meeting.
Yes, I actually just saw that. That's what I was checking when I missed what someone said earlier.
Got it. So I don't know where it is. I can't, whatever.
It's Article 24, but I saw that. Okay. So yeah. So,
okay.
And then I see you have a note there to put a percentage increase, which I think we could do. We could just add a column there that says percent increase and put what's the percent for the recommended operating budget, and then with the total, which I have as the summary statement of the entire section, but we can also put it up in the intro.
Well, yeah. Well, the only reason so that was my note when I was putting this together is last year in the opening sentence we wrote like whatever, I don't remember what it was. The budget is as follows, which is a blank percent increase from.
Yeah, the reason I didn't do that
year
is because I didn't want to put like 7% and make it seem huge when a lot of it's attributable to this one-time free cash thing. But if we take if we add a column,
okay,
and put the two percentages.
Okay. Whatever you think is the best way to represent it.
Well, I mean, whatever the committee thinks, but like the operating budget, I'm just scrolling down in my version so I can see the operating budget. It represents a 2.5% increase, and then if you take into account the one-time expense, allocation and free cash, then it's a 7.49% increase. And so I would not like to put 7.49 and have people freak out when they read that number. That's why I would put it, somehow either like a second column or just state both percentages, not just one.
Okay, I think that's fair. What does everyone else think? Make sense?
Regina, are you saying state them or put them into that table?
I was just suggesting we could put another column to the right of amount that says percent increase, and next to the 54.3 under recommended operating budget, it would show percent increase. In that column, it would say whatever I just said, 2.5.
Yep,
and then the final row, total recommended funding for schools, the percent increase would say 7.49.
Yep, I agree.
Okay, great. I really like this table, by the way.
So then, thank you. Sorry that I was wondering if it was too, well, everybody knows it type information, but I thought it might be worth just breaking out the different types of costs we have related to the schools and the funding source and why we use that funding source to make the point of what's the operating budget, what's the capital improvement plan, and what's free cash. And so I just do that, and then I kind of talk about each of those three categories below. So I talk about the fact that with the 2.5% increase, we're funding level services. I explain what level services means because I don't know, the layperson who might not be super familiar with the budget might not understand what level services means. I give a bit of a explainer that last year we funded new positions in our FY21 budget, but we didn't fill those positions because of COVID. and the MOU, and that said no new initiatives and whatnot. So we didn't fund those positions, but we have the money for them because they were built into the budget. So that is why now when we have these new teachers at the high school for the semesters change from trimester to semester, we can fund those new positions without having a bigger increase in the budget. So I try to explain all that. Maybe it gets into more detail than we would have otherwise, but personally for me, if I hear level services, if I have a kid in the high school and I'm paying attention and I know we're moving to semesters and hiring new teachers, I would say, how are we able to do that? So that's why I went into that explanation.
Regina, I think that second paragraph is really important where you do detail how it was already put in the budget last year, residents
Right.
maybe recall. I mean, I have to agree with you. It's very hard to explain. It's worth the effort.
It is hard to explain. I was challenged
Because,
in writing this.
Even when you listen to Melissa explain, this is why this money is there. It's like, huh? But it's worth it. We have to give it a shot because it is confusing, but it's an important detail. Why is that money there? It's there.
Yeah.
Anyway, good job. I think you did a really good job.
Agreed.
The
So
one
that
thing I noticed, we jump between us and finance committee and the residents might recall. So I'm not sure if we always, it seems like we jump from different angles of perspective.
Yeah, I think Sasha mentioned that we would put this into one voice at a later time, I think, right?
Yep. So this hasn't had the full read,
Yep.
I did some of that, but ran out of time a bit. So this will have a full review where it sounds like one coherent voice, but I'm just made a note, Thomas, to make sure to address that.
I actually had a similar comment because I noted that Regina had, put some bracketed areas, inviting input, confirm that the committee agrees. And I really don't have any problem with the substance or the sentiment of what's being expressed. But I would say, and kind of picking up on what Thomas just said, that for lack of a better term, I think we have to say it in a way that it's an arm's length type of a presentation by the finance committee. We're not the school department. So every time maybe you use the word we, it ought to say school department. Instead of saying that we are very pleased, maybe we should say the finance committee notes, things like that.
Definitely.
Like,
Definitely.
and I'm not going to, now is not the time to wordsmith it as Sasha said, but Sasha, I'd be glad to, at least there's just a couple of paragraphs, the second, third paragraph, and then the end of the second paragraph on the second page of Regina's, that just a couple of sentences, just choosing the words a little bit differently, I think will make a big difference. So I'd be glad to send something to you, Sasha, and you can share it with Regina. If you're happy with it, fine. But as I say, I have no problem with the substance or the sentiment of it. I think it's just a way. I think we have to say it in kind of an arm's length way because we're the finance committee. We're not the school department.
I welcome your help in that. I was struggling with how to word it. So.
No, I think that's a great point by all. So Kevin, if you want to take a crack at that, I would love that. I think that would be really helpful. And then I can kind of put that in here. I would agree with that sentiment. I think everyone is really, I hope if you've reviewed it, and if not, please speak up on the same page with what you're trying to express, Regina. So that taking that and changing the perspective of it, I think would be good.
Okay, so I mean, I don't want to take too much more time, but I talk about the buildings and the fact that building costs are covered in facilities master plan, or the capital improvement plan and the facilities master plan. 2 is, in the works. That's what that paragraph is about, basically to set the stage that, in the future, there will need to be a significant community discussion about how we fund facilities master plan 2 with the school building, proposal that gets developed.
Mhm.
And then the last, I guess, next paragraph, I talk about the one-time COVID-related expenses, which I edited like yesterday with this, now that we know that we were getting 9 million, but we're not really exactly sure the buckets that it would be spent in. So I welcome some feedback on this whole paragraph as well, because I was kind of trying to say, we're supportive of the move, the use of free cash, but obviously we want to use the federal aid that we would get first, if and how it can be used. And then if it can't be used, well, we recommend using the free cash, or we're supportive of using the free cash. So I try to say that. It was very challenging to word. So if anyone has better ideas as to how to word it, I don't have any pride on this.
So to give some context to everyone, I did have a conversation with I've had a conversation with both Superintendent Gilligan and Assistant Superintendent Neely, and their intention is to make a presentation to the school committee in May regarding their use of the $2.6 million. There's, exactly how they're going to use it. And I have let them know that we also would appreciate a presentation. I also took the liberty of mentioning, and obviously we have to kind of discuss this as a committee, that when we do vote on the warrant articles, that while we are, at least I think we are, based on kind of all the feedback I've heard and our dialogue, are incredibly supportive of the school department, the budget, and generally speaking, the $2.6 million, because we are very supportive of the school's needs. We would like to understand what exactly that $2.6 million is going to be used for before we vote favorable action on an appropriation from free cash. And so my hope is that perhaps we kind of can work that into the letter when we kind of write that, right? So maybe that's a piece of the end, Regina, like where you talk about that appropriation.
Yeah, I tried to say that,
if the committee agrees with that approach, which we haven't, discussed at length.
I mean, I tried to end with, so I kind of explain that we don't know, the various bits that we don't know. So I say, therefore, the Finance Committee expects that one-time COVID-related expenses that are able to be funded with federal aid will be funded by that source. And for those that do not meet the criteria, I guess is the word I chose, but maybe we could find a better word. Free cash is an appropriate source of funding and is supportive. I guess I meant the Finance Committee is supportive of allocating up to 2.6 million for this purpose.
Okay.
I don't know.
Does everyone?
It could maybe be wordsmithed, but.
But I think the sentiment is there. Does everyone? Again, that's kind of the intent of this, is to make sure everyone's on the same page in terms of what we're trying to get across. Does everyone agree with that approach?
Yeah. There is. I mean, like we could express. I mean, this is just a maybe, but we could express at the end of it that we could say, to summarize, the Finance Committee agrees that we are fully supportive of supporting the schools. However, how do I put this? However, the cash has to be spent from appropriate. I don't want to say buckets, but that's the money has to be just like you said. But we can just repeat that, and I have to think about that. But I mean, we could add the sentence: "We are fully supportive."
I'm definitely going to send something to you on this, Sasha, and I'm going to copy Regina. Just as an idea, about how, because I think the substance of what she has in here is important, and
it is.
I think it's just a matter of how that thing is spun a little bit. So I'd like to, if you don't mind, I'll take a shot at doing something with that, and I'll get it to you tomorrow, so there won't be any delay.
Great, that sounds excellent. All right. So that being said, does anyone have any more comments, or do you want to move on to OPEB? Move on. Okay. Donovan, do you want to touch on this quickly?
Yeah, I mean, this is a pretty straightforward section. I did edit the narrative a bit. It had seemingly been kept over a few years, and there were some verbiage and phrases in there that didn't seem applicable to me any longer. I am waiting for Lynn Savage to get back to me on a couple of those percentages, but otherwise, I mean, it's pretty straightforward.
Any comments about the section? Okay. Reserved.
So-
Kevin, do you have any?
Well, I just want to say that, you know, I know what I submitted to you, and I know that some things were changed and added, and I like, and I don't know whether it was you or Chris, Sasha, that did that, but I thought it was very appropriate what you put in there. And I know you're going to go back in now and in terms of formatting how all the numbers are presented throughout this warrant letter. But I think this thing covers the sum and substance of what you need to talk about with regard to reserves. And, you know, I have no other comment on it, except that I appreciate whoever made those edits or additions. I don't know if it was you or Chris, but I think it looks good.
I made a few, but it was,
Yeah, I think it
but
looks
you
good.
did all the hard work.
I think it looks good. I do. Yeah.
I think it covers what it needs to cover. And I think it, it touches on the Finance Committee Reserve Fund, which is important because that is new as of last year. So I think it's important to touch on that. I don't have any comments about this section. Does anyone else?
Hey, Sasha, I had a question about OPEB. Years ago, we made a big deal where we wanted to, bring it to light that, unlike any other town, we have a big liability and it grows every year. And I think now, potentially in the future, we're going to be doing significant hiring in the school department, which is going to, build that OPEB liability. Do we want to, as a standard practice, do we want to point out year after year, the unfunded liability is X? It was 100 million or something last year, 105 million. I don't know what it is this year. But is that a good, because that's perspective, that's context. So everybody wants more teachers, and we can afford the teachers now, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't do it now, but people should know that there's a trade-off that, 25 years later, 30 years later, what does that number look like? So I'm just now throw it up to the group here. Is that something, I don't think we have time, but we just simply point it out.
My understanding of the deficit was before we established this policy is that new hires, that's taken care of on a going forward basis. So it isn't as much of a problem. It's just a matter of catching up with what we inherited. And once we realized we had this liability from prior employees.
So we throw in several $1,000s per employee, which we all agree is a good practice. Does that keep it flat at 100 million, or does it still grow? I don't know what it is now. I don't think.
No, it still grows. It's up to 127 million now.
Ed, can you mute?
Yeah. Sorry, it's really.
Yeah, so it has grown. It's up to 127 million now. I mean, it's gonna continue to grow. I think it's a very valid point on Ed's point. I have no problem putting a few sentences together and adding that to the section.
I think that I think it, we should consider putting a sentence in there that says we need to be not saying it's good or bad, but that we need to, as a community, need to be cognizant of the impacts that new employees have on OPEB if we do not pre-fund the liability.
Yep.
Right?
I can put that together, Sasha.
Okay, because there is, we had a big group and there was a policy, but I don't know that the policy was officially voted on by the select board. I don't know if Regina, if it was that answer, I don't know. And I think in practice, it is happening on the municipal side. I don't recall if it is fully happening on the school side.
It's happening on the school side.
I believe it's happening on the school side as well.
Yeah. I don't recall if we voted on it officially, but
I couldn't find it. I looked, Regina, I looked, I couldn't find any record that you guys did vote on it.
Yeah, it might have been in our budget policy statement as like a directive, a thing that we, agreed at the beginning of the year we would do. But you're right, we may.
Okay.
I don't think we did vote on it.
Okay. I mean, I guess it doesn't really matter. It's irrelevant, other than we should just put in here, I think, a couple sentences about the unfunded liability and just being cognizant of the impacts.
You'll have it tomorrow, Sasha.
Perfect. Thank you.
On the
right.
reserves section, I was wondering if we should, I mean, we say what the amounts are that, that we're transferring there, but we don't make a comment that they meet sort of the targets that we've set ourselves, because we have, policies that we say we're going to put X percent, in the stabilization funds. Like we've set those policies for ourselves, and we just don't make a statement. This is, this is within our established policy for the fund or whatever. I was wondering if we should do that.
Well, I think it says the town currently has an OPEB liability of 127 million, has a goal of contributing 5% of the OPEB unfunded actuarial liability each year. This year, the town plans to contribute 75,000.
Sorry, I wasn't talking about OPEB. I was talking about like the town stabilization fund and the
Because we have a
capital stabilization fund.
cap.
Like we,
yeah. We can look into that.
I mean, I'm not married to the idea. It's just, I mean, I don't feel it's critical, but you kind of, I guess, again, if you're a new person who maybe hasn't paid attention to the budget, do you look at that and say, well, is that a good amount? Is that not a good amount? Is that enough?
Right. It
You know what I
gives
mean?
you a benchmark.
Yeah.
The one thing I will ask, we have historically put OPEB trust in reserves, but do we want to put it up here? Because it's here again.
Yeah, it's kind of a little bit.
Do we want to put the entire OPEB, do we want to basically copy and paste this up top?
Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
I think it makes sense to do that. And it's good. It's a
I
good
don't think we should
paragraph.
have it in two places.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm just gonna put this here, and then you can work your magic when you look at that. Okay, Donovan? Yep.
Yes, no problem.
Sorry, just one more thing about the reserves. Maybe it's more of like an intro paragraph rather than saying within each section, this is 5%, this is 1%, this is whatever. It could just say, something around the select board and the finance committee adopted financial reserve policies setting target percentages for transfers to reserves. Back in 2004, we've been following these every year, and this year's no different. We are meeting the percentages or whatever, something along those lines.
We actually started them in 1995.
Or whenever we did. I pulled an old budget book out.
It would be here, right after here.
Sorry, I was saying it's the intro paragraph of the reserve section, because I wasn't talking about just about OPEB.
Well, they were all created at different times.
I was looking at this financial reserves. Sorry, there's a financial reserves policy statement I'm looking at last year's budget book, and it says adopted by Board of Selectmen in February 2014, adopted by Finance Committee February 2014, and it lists out. It talks about the reserve policies and the percentage that should be, allocated for each category that we want to target allocating. So I'm just saying, if we did meet that target allocation of 1% or 5% or whatever it is per category, we could just make the blanket statement up top. Yes, something like that.
Okay. So we can refer back to that and see how to work it in here. that work?
That works.
The capital improvement plan, Thomas.
You know, the language hasn't really changed much over the last 3 to 4 years. I try to keep it always, you know, as small as possible, you know, sorted in these buckets at the beginning. I think one thing I wanted to point out is that the only deviation to previous years is that the facility plan is not, or the funds for the facility plan is not included anymore, which typically was, you know, quite some money, 10 to 15 million. And Melissa left that out in the current CIP because they basically just restarted the discussion again. As we all know, you know, school and all that stuff. So when you look at that, you know, we're spending. It seems like we're spending less. The debt ratio is going down, but I think it's important to notice that there's a big chunk missing, and when that comes back, all those ratios will be back to normal, or I would actually expect be above our target of 5%.
Yeah.
So I think that's important to point out. You know, there's the normal stuff, which there's nothing really out of the ordinary, but really the investment going forward is not included at this point.
Does everyone feel like this adequately covers that?
You know, and I also, you know, I always look, what's the story in our review? I mean, we're describing well all these buckets, you know, and, you know, sometimes we just, you know, put it in different words than what's in the budget book. And what's the story really? And I think that section gives you a little bit of a story that there is a lot to come in the next few years. When we look at the plan and the schools and you know, reducing our sizes of classes and need more teachers, you know, it will be interesting how that will be funded actually going forward.
Mm-hmm.
We kind of skip this year because of the pandemic. You know, we kind of started that theme. The school needs more money. You know, the schools are not adequate. They're too small. They're old. Class sizes are too big. We started that 2 or 3 years ago, really with that focus. And we kind of, you know, we're not mentioning much in this year because of the pandemic. So we just made it through the pandemic. And, you know, as far as I can see, the pandemic didn't have really an impact on us. You know, or no severe impact. The extra expenses are more or less reimbursed, right? I don't think there's much left that we have to take care of. But all the initiatives kind of stopped and put on hold. We didn't think about the facility plan. We didn't think about the schools. So what's next now?
I would, if I was kind of coming back, you're now looking at yourself, I assume, but so I could see everyone's faces. But I would say, and part of why I wanted to skip back to the executive summary later at the end, but let's just kind of think about this, is the overall theme is we're really preparing, right? We're preparing for additional capacity to take on more debt, and we're preparing to fund the schools and whatever the community decides that looks like, right? We're not here to make that decision. Town meeting is ultimately going to make that decision, but we're here to make sure it makes sense. It's financially prudent for our community. And so I think what we're saying is we're gearing up for that conversation in more depth. So right now we are, you know, the town manager is consciously making the decision to not borrow this year's capital improvement plan. The schools are working on have a subcommittee to figure out how we're going to build out facilities master plan 2. I think that's what we have to kind of say in the executive summary. And we're touching on in all these pieces. And that's kind of where we bring it all together. And the message is this year, because of the pandemic, that hasn't advanced significantly, and we don't anticipate that in FY22. And we have a reduced services or level services budget because of that, because of projections and reduced revenue. But that doesn't mean that after the impacts of the pandemic are over, the town isn't gearing up for a big shift. We don't know what that will look like yet, but it's that conversation is happening. And I know we have to wordsmith that, and that's a very long-winded and whatever, but I think that's ultimately what's happening.
Yeah, and how do we make the connection to the revenues? There are the discussion of moratoriums. Don't build out the town further. Stop development. That's, you can't see that separately. If the we really the last year was a lost year. We didn't move forward as a town for the right reasons. Everything stopped, and a year ago, and certainly you don't want to move ahead when the pandemic happens. So, but now we're trying to regroup, it's knowing what the town wants to achieve, and at the same time hearing moratoriums and no development and keep everything the same way it is. I have a hard time to reconcile that. Now I'm not saying, or I don't know how we could put that into our letter. We don't want to be seen as we're pushing one or the other direction. But I would say the current revenue would certainly not cover what the town tries to achieve in the next, 5 years.
That's but that's it. That sentence is exactly what we say, right? So we've said it before. 2 years ago, we said that exact thing in our report. We said the current revenues do not support, at this rate, we cannot fund with our current revenue sources, any significant increase in the school expenditures. And we said that. So I think it's the same thing. I don't know that we can discuss, what we may or may want to say at town meeting, but in terms of this report, I don't think we can opine on specifically, any development moratorium, only that currently our revenues do not support, what we may need in the future or what people are discussing in the future. Right?
We really don't want to comment on the moratorium as the warrant article at all. I don't know if any of you watched the Board of Selectmen meeting last night, but they did discuss it, and there is some doubt about whether the way it's written, that it will even able to be added to the warrant. And if by some chance if it is added to the warrant, there's a high likelihood that it won't be accepted by the state if it was voted in. There are issues with that warrant article. I think we don't want to talk about that because it's still in the works, whether that is going to actually be successfully on the warrant or not. And actually it might be worth it's tricky. As a matter of fact, that's one of my tasks. I want to reread what was presented last night at the Board of Selectmen, or rather, I'm sorry, the Select Board. So I recommend you read that also. But in the meantime, I agree with you, Sasha. Let's take that little piece out of it, but still reiterate, because you're right. Revenues will not support the things that we want to spend on in the coming years, as we have stated in the past couple of years. You are correct.
And it's maybe not this town meeting because we don't really have a number. But the town meeting has to decide: do we want an upgrade of our schools or not? If not, then of course we don't have to worry about revenues, or not as much as if the town decides to go full steam in upgrading our school systems. That needs to then follow by the revenue, either higher taxes or a broader tax base. That just needs to be made clear. And we're not taking a side at all.
I agree.
It's like 3 years ago when we, about the other plan at 1600 Osgood. We didn't take a side. We didn't say this is good or this is bad, but we get if we want to achieve certain things in town, we need more revenues, and that would have been a source of revenue potentially, without saying good or bad or we're for or against it. So we just try to put the connections together, and I would like to see this. Sasha, I haven't really seen your summary, your final summary, but I'm hoping to see that in exactly that in the first section that we make that consistent.
Yeah.
It would be a shame if a moratorium will decide it. That kind of almost preempts then the decision about the school system next year. If there's a moratorium and nothing will be built and developed for the next couple of years, I don't think we have to talk about the upgrade of the school system.
Well, I don't want to, respectfully, I really don't want to get down the path of talking about a development moratorium. I think the point of your comment, and it's I hear it loud and clear, and I think everyone else does too, is our current revenue sources will not support what potentially the 7-year plan of the school committee is projecting, right? We have something that they put out there that's public. We would need to increase our revenue sources in order to support that. We can say that very clearly. And there's several ways to do that, right? One is to expand your commercial tax base. One is to increase taxes. There's ways to do that. But I don't know that we have to specifically call out any kind of moratorium when we say that. And that part of this conversation in this meeting is to talk about this so that I can write the executive summary that kind of ties all these pieces together. So does everyone agree that Thomas's sentiment, and that's kind of what we're trying to do, is piece all of that stuff and tie it back to all the individual sections?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
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 All right. So I'll take a crack at that. And then we can continue to review. Do you want me to pull the report back up? So we just have one more section. So enterprise funds. Oh, it's really two, I guess, because Ed did this piece, and then Jen did this piece. So the only comment I had, Ed, is that, do you mind reviewing what just looking at this actually. Last year we did a combined. We said kind of what the combined budget was. I thought that was really helpful. So maybe if we could just update that for FY22.
Okay, yeah, I can do that. I just, last year we tried to cut it way back. I thought we were next year without any increase. That tells most of the story, and the town manager's letter is pretty descriptive for anybody that wants additional information. But yes, I can certainly do that. The only thing that was potentially worth discussing, but I don't know if we have really any insight into it, is that the assessments increase. They increased 5%, and it's a pretty big part of the budget. I mean, I'm making an assumption. I don't know for a fact, but I'm making an assumption that whatever they increase our assessment, they increase Andover's and Lawrence's and everybody else's. I mean, I don't absolutely know that, but it just seems that that's the one thing we have to keep our eye on. But she certainly called that out in her section. So,
Okay.
but yes, I'll do that tomorrow.
Thank you. Does anyone have any other questions or comments about the water fund and the sewer fund? No. Okay. Jen, do you want to quickly talk about the Stevens estate?
Sure, and I do need to update this with actual numbers for the budget, but this is once again sort of a tricky area because it's just in such a constant state of flux or development. So what I tried to do in this section was just note, and maybe we can update it again at the last minute, where the town is in terms of the RFP process. But essentially, the budget for the Stevens estate has gone down dramatically this year because there's no revenue coming in, or very limited revenue coming in, and because of this ongoing process, it's really sort of hard to see what is going to be happening in a few months with the estate. So I tried to capture in this paragraph that uncertainty or developing situation. I don't know what the best way to put that is, but essentially just that the select board is looking for a long-term solution. And while the COVID impact is still there, the budget is just down. If anybody has a different idea on how to approach it, I'd be happy to hear it, because this is a struggle for me to put together.
Yeah, I wouldn't know how to. It's a great asset, but at the same time, it's a great liability. And the town decided to keep a great asset with a great liability. Now we have to deal with it.
It is.
No, we shouldn't. Make it. It always sounds like, yeah, we'll be fine. I don't think we will be fine. It will cost us a lot if that cannot be solved.
I agree. I feel like it. My only concern with the way it's written now is it doesn't convey, I guess, to get back to Thomas, your point earlier about telling a story, it doesn't tell the story that there's concern to me as much as maybe it should be, I guess. I mean, first of all, should we say the budget really only covers 4 months, right? Is that what I think we should point out?
Yeah.
I know it says that it reflects attempts to minimize the costs, but I think it should be clear it reflects enough to run the estate for 4 months, during which we have, some events booked or whatever. But otherwise, the place is shut down, right?
Is there a time frame on the negotiations for the group that put the bid in for the RFP?
My understanding is the town manager was hoping for something, before the fall. Is that what everyone recalls, or around that time? Yeah. So I guess my recommendation in this case would be to, and tell me if you guys feel comfortable with this, would be to insert the kind of couple sentences at the end, kind of about what the budget actually is covering and why, to incorporate it in there, and then perhaps end with 1 or 2 sentences that convey that we look forward as a committee to a resolution, to kind of basically a resolution of this ongoing or ever evolving situation, in order to protect the town from any unforeseen expenses related, that are currently unresolved or uncovered. I mean, I'd have to think about how to wordsmith that, but you know what I'm trying to convey.
It's definitely a pending situation, but I think that group that responded are the same group that run the Crane estate over at Ipswich. And I suspect that they're quite serious about taking over the Stevens estate up there and running it along the same lines that they're running the Crane estate up in Ipswich. So, this is a pending situation that if the town manager's time frame is early fall, I mean, I expect we're going to have some sort of a
Sasha,
I don't.
I was just going to say, I think the issue here is whether the school committee, the finance committee wants to intimate any kind of position one way or the other. This is a wonderfully neutral statement, but I think what you all are saying, from what I'm understanding, is, do we want to say anything as, like, from what I'm hearing is, we have to protect ourselves. The town has to protect themselves from an inordinate amount of costs that might result from the Stevens estate if this issue isn't resolved. So,
or even just say,
we had a lot of that last year. Sorry, Donovan. We had a lot of that last year where we talked about the significant capital improvements that the estate needed or needs, and the significant expenses and issues that they had even with their operating budget. And I looked at that and sort of pulled that back. But what I'm hearing is maybe we ought to put some of that story back in and say that this is a significant challenge that we're continuing to face. And, this is what the town is doing right now, but there's just still no answer to it. And I don't think that there will be. And I have to admit, I just haven't had the chance to catch up on where the negotiations are or what's happening with the process. And I can I'll reach out to Melissa and see if there's any further update, but I don't think we're going to have a resolution to this before town meeting or before this is published.
Correct. I think that's a correct assessment. And again, that's why I reiterate, it's really the flavor of the board. Like, it might even be worthy of a vote. Like, how do we feel? Do we want to keep it neutral, or do we want to, express a little bit more of support towards continuing negotiations or looking for a permanent resolution? That's what I'm hearing you say, Sasha.
Isn't
No,
there
I'm not. Just to be super clear, I actually disagree with making any comments about negotiations at all. I think it's important to stick to facts, like as in the long-term, and Jen can do this because she did it last year. The long-term advisory committee, their assessment of the situation was this. We continue, the town continues and the Board of Selectmen, or the Select Board rather, continue to seek a resolution to this issue. And we look forward to seeing how we as a town, come to a resolution. So we've identified the liability. We have said, here's how the town is addressing that liability. We look forward to seeing how this is resolved. Because
Nothing wrong with that.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
I think
that would be my position and recommendation if everyone feels comfortable with that.
Yeah, I think I would like to have a red flag. And I know I'm biased. I always saw this as a great asset, but also at a great liability. And the town decided to keep that asset. With it, if there's no solution, it's an enormous liability, and the town just needs to know. I mean, again, it's not about right or wrong. It's just we keep it. We have no solution. It's going to cost us a lot. And one thing I believe I recall Melissa said she might actually not get approval because of that enterprise fund runs in a negative.
Yes, I was gonna say exactly that. I would like to say something about the fact that the enterprise fund needs to be certified and have a certain number of of dollars in it, and we're perilously close to not having that. For me, the statement about the liability has to be stronger than, well, I don't think there's much of a statement there right now about how much of a liability it is. I feel that it needs to be clear that it is a very big liability.
So
I mean, we're on the verge not getting a state certified budget.
So you can say, right. So historically we had this issue, so we can also say that, right? So previously there, we came back with, and I can't speak off the top of my head to the specific situation of what happened. So maybe Jen, if you could reach out to Lynn and get that, or Melissa, or whoever you feel comfortable, get some of that specifics, we can include that. And then I think if you want to draft that, and then, we can all talk about it and finalize it next week, because I think you've heard kind of that people are looking to be clear on the liability. I don't, if that's okay with everyone, and then we can agree on the finalized version at our meeting next week. But I don't know that I think we've got the point, right? I don't want to beat it down. I think everyone's clear that there needs to be a stronger statement.
No, thank you everybody for your input on that. It was a difficult one. I wasn't sure how the committee would want to approach it, but that all makes great sense, and I'll have another version for us to look at.
Does that work? Okay. I think that was the last section, right? There's a conclusion. So the conclusion I just wrote, let's pull that up. All right. We included that. This is just a thank you and a summary, and we can adjust this as we need to. Okay, in terms of timing, everyone who had we talked about their sections and had some notes. It's Tuesday, do you think that it would be possible to get those revised sections to me by like midday Friday so I can work on it, or Thursday? I don't want to push too hard, but as soon as you can, if anyone needs a bit more time, that's fine too. We can push that. I can push that specific section a bit, but that way I can put it together and then recirculate it so everyone has ample time to review before Tuesday. What I don't want is to get things late and me or whoever else also wants to take a look too, not have enough time to turn it around for the committee. So I want to make sure everyone has time to read it before next meeting.
Sasha, I already know that I'm not going to be able to get it to you before Friday at the earliest.
No
It
problem.
might even be Saturday, but
totally understood. That's kind of why I knew that. That's been a busy work schedule these last couple of weeks, so I knew that. So we can circle back on that over the weekend. But if whoever else can, that would be helpful. And then if anyone else wants to volunteer, you want to volunteer now or talk offline, and you guys all want to take a look, that would be helpful. Dustin, I also had the budget sent to you in Excel. So if you want to take a look at all of those kind of budget numbers and do a bit of scrubbing on behalf of the Finance Committee, make sure there's nothing that should be brought to our attention as a committee, that we're kind of doing all of our due diligence, that would be really great. I'd appreciate that. We've kind of talked about that. Anything else that everyone, that you all want to talk about or feel like we need more information about before we vote on the warrant articles next meeting, or before we finalize this letter next meeting?
No, except thank
No.
you to you and Chris for all your work you've done putting this warrant letter together so far.
Thank you.
Give Sasha and everybody else that credit. Don't give me any credit. I've been a slacker. It's all Sasha.
No, everyone's been very helpful. I appreciate it. Okay, so I think we can move on if anyone has any other comments. Old business. I don't have any old business to discuss. We've kind of touched on everything. Any other things we need to talk about? Let's move on. We can approve our prior meeting minutes. Take a look. Our minutes from April 6th, 2021. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve the minutes as written.
And
Second.
Donovan O'Connell will second.
All right, Chris Allen made a motion. Donovan seconded the motion. I'll do a roll call vote. Dustin Silk.
I approve. I agree.
Regina Keene.
Yes.
Chris Allen.
Yes.
Donovan.
Yes.
Ed McMillan.
Yes.
Thomas Ringler.
Yes.
Jen Luz.
yes.
Kevin Foley.
Yes.
I also vote in the affirmative. So the prior meeting minutes are approved. I think that we are able to adjourn the meeting. Does anyone have anything else they want to discuss before I adjourn the meeting? Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Move to
Chris
adjourn.
Allen.
Second,
Chris
Regina Keene.
Allen and Regina second, and thank you both. I will do a roll call vote. Kevin Foley.
Yes.
Jen Luz.
Yes.
Thomas Ringler.
Yes.
Regina Keene.
Yes.
Chris Allen.
Yes.
Donovan O'Connell.
Yes.
Ed McMillan.
Yes.
Dustin Silk.
Yes.
All right. Thank you all. The meeting is adjourned. Appreciate
Good
it.
night, everybody.